40 Vision Podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Timmy B of the Fight Insight Podcast. How's everything going today?
Good, buddy. Thanks a lot for having me, man. I really appreciate it, and good to be here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. So the Fight Insight Podcast is a weekly pod featuring guests from the world of MMA and combat sports. You can check them out on YouTube and Instagram, and it's an absolute must-watch and must-subscribe for all combat sports and MMA fans. So today's topic is the current and future state of MMA and combat sports. So let's just jump right in with a whopper of a question. Have we reached peak MMA?
Very, very close, I would think. I mean, the thing what we're seeing now is like you can go on your Instagram and you can see kids like 7 years old that are like wrestling phenoms and jujitsu phenoms that could surely like are going to become superstars of the future. And you didn't see that before. So I think we're nearing it as those kids mature. You know what I mean? Like MMA now isn't just something that you see like on an illegal VHS tape back in the
Yeah.
day. You know what I mean? Like now it's everywhere. It's on ESPN, it's on pay-per-view, it's on everywhere, right? So I think it as it becomes more ingrained into culture, it becomes something that kids are training at an earlier age, you know? And it becomes not so much of a blood sport as it is just a sport. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people now understanding. And when you look at a lot of the stars today, you know, they're not like the thugs of UFC one time. You know what I mean? They're not like these like monsters that you would walk across the street from. These are just like normal everyday guys, you know? So I think that that's definitely put it into the mainstream, and I think we're definitely reaching the golden age. Like I don't know how much better it could get from an athletic standpoint is what I mean. You know what I mean? Production value and marketing and stuff like that, that always has room to grow. But in terms of like the actual athletic ability and where the peak human physical ability to compete in mixed martial arts, I think, yeah, we're very, very close, man.
And I remember, the early days of the sport where it was basically, I mean, it sounds harsh to say, but it was kind of like human cockfighting, right? There was like no weight classes. It was bare knuckle. It was kind of cartoonish. It was underground, like you said, illegal VHS tapes. It was like alongside, you go to like bumfights.com and you'd find MMA and combat sports and stuff. And it's crazy to me to see the growth of the sport. And I mean, how long have you been invested in combat sports? Were you like an early adopter or a little bit later to the game?
I mean, dude, I was at my friend John Borromeo. We were at his cousin's house who had an illegal black box. I think the statute of limitations is now gone. You can't like arrest them anymore, but they had that illegal black box, and we watched UFC 1. And we were like, what the heck is this? You know what I mean?
Was that like early 90s?
Yeah, something
Mid-90s?
like that, like, yeah, I'm really old. But we had like, so back then, like I was a fan of it, like, cause you see it. But I think growing up, I think much like everyone, it was when the Ultimate Fighter season 1 came out, right? With Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner and that reality show that really relaunched UFC into the mainstream. That's when I became like really hardcore into it. So that was the season that I think brought a lot of people on board.
I think it added like the personalities to the sport, whereas before it was just two guys you don't really know beating up on each other in an octagon. But I feel like it's kind of like the F1 series, the Drive to Survive, which has made F1 way more popular than it ever has been, just by adding color to it, adding background, adding personality. So you become a little more invested in the sport and in the guys. So I mean, we talk about MMA and combat sports, and I think people use UFC as a brand name, right? It's like Band-Aid or Kleenex, something like that, when there's a lot of other organizations. So, how can organizations like the PFL and Bellator, how can they compete with the brand name of UFC? And it's a two-part question: is what has UFC done to differentiate themselves from these other organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think UFC was the first. It wasn't the first, but like it was the first in Western America, or in the West, that really took off. You know what I mean? I think they did the right thing by doing that reality show, like you said, right? This isn't an age, like for your listeners, this was in an age of no social media. So there's none of that. So imagine just watching, people nowadays wouldn't even be able to imagine just watching sports and having no idea who the people are outside of like watching them compete. But that Ultimate Fighter reality show gave you a sense of who they were and stuff like that. So you started to grow and notice them. Ultimate Fighter did that, or sorry, UFC did that through their show, right? So that's what I think started getting them. And I think they've just done a good job of attracting the top talent. And I mean top talent in the cage, outside of the cage, in the production, in the commentators, in the cameramen, everything. It's top notch. You know what I mean? From the cut people to the referees, right? They make sure that their product is prime. What can PFL and Bellator, or they're synonymous now because PFL bought Bellator, but what can any organization like ONE FC out in Asia, what can they do? If you ask me, nothing. And actually, we predicted on our show that we think ONE FC is going to go bankrupt this year, and because there's talks about their funding is lacking, or that their investors might start to pull out. PFL invested, I don't know how much Saudi money they got. Dude, nobody is watching their stuff. Like, as a
Wow.
content creator and what I'm putting out there, when I put out stuff with Bellator and PFL and ONE FC, and I have their fighters on my show and stuff like that. But boy, oh boy, I can notice it myself. Like, just the fan reaction and stuff like that when it's a non UFC person, it's tough, man. And I think that those organizations are going to have a hard time, because if you're striving to become number one, I almost feel like it's too insurmountable right now. Like, I don't know that you can do it. Is anyone ever going to beat Kleenex or Q-tips? I don't think so. Like,
True.
that's it. You've dominated. Is there ever going to be another NFL or NBA? No. Like, that's it. And I don't know what these other leagues need to do to at least stay afloat, because it's very important for these leagues to be there, because it's a place for people to earn a living, right? Like, it's a place for these fighters to earn a living and make money and stuff like that. And also, it's a feeder system into UFC. As much as those guys don't want to be feeder systems, it kind of is, right? We've
Hmm.
recently seen Michael Venom Page or Justin Gaethje, or other guys make that transition into the league and do well. So I don't know, man. I don't think that
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone's ever going to beat them. I mean, UFC would have to do something catastrophic to fumble the ball this badly that they would drop. It's just not going to happen.
Hmm. It helps definitely that they have, of course, the brand name, the name recognition. They have the deal with ESPN, so it's tied
Yeah,
into ESPN Plus, which a lot of people already buy for niche sports
yeah,
or just cable cutters. At least in the US, I believe in Canada, they're with DAZN. I think they have their streaming deal
dude, I don't
for
even know
UFC. I
what
mean,
that
is that right?
is. What,
No.
UFC? I don't even know what
Yeah.
DAZN is or what that is. Is that in Canada? I don't even know. The way I get my UFC is that, like, it's on TV, or I have Fight Pass. So I
Okay.
think you guys don't have Fight Pass anymore. I think ESPN Plus kind of took that over. Is
Hmm.
that right? So, but
Yeah, I want to say Fight Pass is the international, basically
yeah,
just
so
UFC dedicated.
yeah,
Okay.
so we have that. I have Fight Pass. I've been a subscriber in Fight Pass since like almost day one, man. They mailed me a free Google Chromecast when I signed up. That's how old it
Oh
was. Like,
wow,
I got a free Chromecast when I signed up. Yeah, so Fight Pass is the
that's
way to go.
awesome.
Yeah, it's just the branding, everything. I'm wearing a UFC watch, for God's sakes. Like, the Timex watches, they're really nice, man.
Hmm.
But yeah, like, I got my pop figures, my glove. Like, yeah, they're just everywhere.
Yeah,
Uh,
and they've got the gyms, they've got the other stuff. I mean, like I feel like you may have kind of already answered this question, but maybe there's another way to look at it. But I mean, Bellator just signed a huge deal with Max, the
yeah, I saw. Yeah,
distributor, and their first event wasn't even a pay per view; it was free for Max subscribers. People already pay for that service, and I believe it's in like 90 or 100 million homes, at least in the U.S. So I
yeah.
think my original question is, can they steal some of the spotlight from the UFC? I think that's a no. But is that kind of niche streaming packages at least another way to grow the sport? And do you think that was a good move by Bellator?
No, I think, because it was funny when PFL bought them. The owner, Don Davis, he was on Ariel Hawani's show, which Frickin' Don Davis, get on my podcast, you son of a bitch. We've been calling you out for so long. Stop only going on Ariel. Get on my show, man. Don Davis went on and he talked about how they weren't, they had bought PFL had bought Bellator, but we're not sure where the broadcast rights are going to go, blah, blah. Right from then, I was saying to everybody on my show, I said, then they're not going to ESPN, because he would want to say, hey, they're going to come to ESPN too, right? As well as PFL, because PFL is as well.
Mm-hmm.
Going to another service, like, what the hell is this provider? What is it called? Max? What is that?
Max.
Like, do I have to pay for that?
HBO Max. So HBO Max is now, they merged with it's like Warner
Oh,
Brothers and one other one. It's the one that has Game of Thrones and Sopranos
okay,
and
okay, okay.
one
I
of the
didn't
big
even know
shows.
that.
So
Oh,
well, there you
Max
go.
is HBO Max? All right. I didn't
Yeah,
know that. Look, the minute you put it on, well, I don't know. See, HBO Max isn't crazy here in Canada. Like, I know it is in the US. Um, all I'll say is that I don't know that it matters where you are on your publishing. It still matters how much social media branding that you do and the quality of the product you put out. I think, because ONE FC in Asia, do you know ONE FC? Like, when I say that, do you even know what that is?
I've heard of it. Is it like
Okay.
I think there is it the predecessor, not predecessor, whatever, the
Like Pride?
evolution of like the K1 and Pride
Yeah,
fighting.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the biggest Asian promotion. If you see interviews with their owner, Shatri Sichadong, he says they are number one when you look at global numbers and blah blah. Yeah, that's because there's like 1 billion people in Asia, but they're not paying for anything. You know what I mean? So like it's a very weird concept. But ONE FC is on Amazon Prime. So shocker and spoiler alert to all your listeners, right? But nobody even knows that, right?
I
Like,
didn't know that.
yeah. So they run live events on Amazon Prime, right? And they thought when they signed this is it, baby. We freaking hit the big time. We're going to be on Amazon Prime. Everyone's going to know us. I train at a martial arts gym. I can count on one hand how many people watch ONE FC. And it's on Amazon Prime, which everybody has. Like that, I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's as ingrained as Netflix, I would think. Like everybody's got that. It's free with your Amazon
Yeah,
Prime. You know what I mean? Nobody watches it, dude. It's I don't know. Bellator signing to that. Sure, maybe, but then it depends. Like, how much is Max gonna like promote it on their page and stuff like that? Like, are you gonna see
hmm
it like when you turn it on? Is that gonna come up right away for everybody? And then the problem is, even the most casual fan knows it's not UFC.
very true.
Even if you watch it, you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be UFC. It's not. Eh.
hmm
And like you've got to do something to hook people. Like if they don't have an incredible production value, if they don't have something that's really going to lure you in, it's tough, man. I don't know what they want to do. ONE FC has done it before, so has Bellator, but you need to do maybe Grand Prix, like which is what we call our tournaments in MMA, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Especially like one night tournaments. If you can do like one night tournaments, get people invested. Like even my wife, who, like, God bless her, she puts up with me and puts up with like the MMA stuff. She wasn't into it before. She'll watch a little bit here and there. But if there's a one night tournament, that seems to suck in casual fans, because they can, because they'll introduce the combatants, they'll introduce them, they'll give a little story, and then you see them win. And then the one guy that goes on, now you're vested. You're like, oh, I know this guy. I just saw him fight. Like, so even the casual fan hasn't had to watch this guy over the last 12 months. You just saw him fight. And so you can kind of follow along. If you do things like that, maybe you can capture people. But just going on
hmm
a streaming site and thinking like, oh, everybody has this, they'll watch. I don't think they will, man. And then I don't even know how you judge like your popularity. What I will say is that when I post stuff on my YouTube, like when I post my videos, if I have a Bellator fighter or ONE FC fighter or a UFC fighter, obviously I go hashtag Bellator, hashtag PFL, right?
hmm
You know how when you do that and the social media site or YouTube or whatever shows you like how many
yeah.
people have used that hashtag?
Or the number of videos, yeah, associated,
Yeah.
yeah.
The number of videos that are dude, hashtag PFL, hashtag Bellator. like nothing. Like it's brutal how much lower it is, which shows you then how many people are even generating content about that. Like
Hmm.
it's a crazy, shockingly low number when compared to UFC. So
Yeah, and I think the awareness part is the real uphill battle, right? Because again, that natural advantage of being on ESPN. So if you're watching Sports Center, if you're at a sports bar or restaurant and Sports Center's on, or you're watching something else on ESPN like college basketball, they're going to run ads for the next UFC fight, the next pay per
right,
view, the next card.
yeah,
So there's that automatic awareness. I'm sure they have millions, hundreds of millions of followers on social media, hundreds of millions more than Bellator or Max and all these combined. So it's just like that draws in the casual fan versus being on Prime. Like even if you're subscribed to Prime, how am I going to know that Bellator has a big event unless I go to Prime and see it? On
search
the
it
big.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Or even if they
Yeah,
promote it, I have to go there to find out about it, and it's just like it's one more barrier to entry. Uh, but like you said, it is important that these other organizations, these other leagues, it's like a farm system almost for UFC. Despite again, like you said, they don't want to be that. It's just kind of it's the reality they have to accept. It's almost like the USFL, UXFL with the NFL. They've learned, we can't compete with the NFL. We're going to
right,
be essentially like an amateur development league for them. We're going to
yeah,
play in the spring. We're going to do all this blah blah blah, and we'll release guys out of contracts if they want to go play for the NFL. So it makes sense. It sets up this feeder system.
yeah.
But the other thing on with UFC being able to monopolize things is they have a very tight grip on fighter pay. The fighters don't have much leverage. So one way some of these bigger names have kind of skirted that is by going into boxing. What do you think about some of these guys, at least a few of them that have gone into boxing for these big paydays? Is that a sustainable thing?
Um, well, I don't think so. Here's the thing: only so many people can do it. Is the thing, right? Like Conor McGregor does it. Okay, fine. Francis Ngannou does it. Okay, fine. But you're not going to see your average MMA fighter go and do it for that giant payday. Like it's kind of a weird thing because it's not a reasonable path to success for like most MMA fighters, if that makes sense. You know, it also doesn't help that they're not winning at all. And like
True.
I called this Ngannou versus Anthony Joshua slaughter because I do a lot of conspiracy theories on my podcast, okay? And I
I love a good
guarantee,
conspiracy theory.
and I think they're right.
Please.
I think Tyson Fury either took it easy on Ngannou the first fight, or so took it easy because that was the deal they made, or he underestimated him big time, right? And he just didn't
Yeah,
think that
both
this
very
guy's going to be that
plausible.
good.
Yeah.
Ngannou doesn't even train with a freaking real boxing coach. He trains with his MMA guy. Like he didn't go to like a pure boxing thing, and he's not like the slick, head movement boxing guy. Like that's not what he was in the cage either. So like, I think Fury took it easy on him either because they agreed to, or because he underestimated. But all I knew
Hmm.
was that when he was going out to fight AJ that second time, I'm like, Anthony Joshua's not going to friggin' take this guy lightly. He's not going to want to get embarrassed like Tyson Fury kind of was. AJ's going to go out and murder this dude and say, like, you don't come into my sport that I've been training my whole life and think that you're going to take me even to a decision. Right. And
Hmm.
sure enough, he beats him in 2 rounds handily.
Yeah, he folded him in half basically.
Right.
it
It's,
was it was
it's,
kind of
it's,
embarrassing. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same as like if someone comes into MMA, right? You sure as well damn better think that the MMA fighter is going to blow that person out of the water from whatever sport they want to come in from, right? And I think we've
Hmm.
generally kind of seen that. You know what I mean? Because the MMA guy is going to have the ground game, the striking, the whatever. So whatever you come in with your specialty, I'm just going to counter it with the opposite. You know,
Yeah.
um, the only kind of oddball to that theory is Clarissa Shields, which I don't know if you know who that is. She's like an Olympic boxer.
Hmm. Yeah.
She's come into PFL and she's had some success. I think she's won 3 fights, maybe her first three. However, conspiracy theory, we had on her latest opponent who just fought like maybe a month ago. Her name was oh my goodness, Kelsey DeSantis,
Hmm.
she outlines all the fraudulent crap that PFL pulled on her. Okay.
Oh,
They didn't tell her there was no elbows in the fight until the night before.
okay.
They moved the weight class up like 15 pounds a couple weeks before, which the conspiracy is that Clarissa Shields knew it was going to be at a higher weight class. And then they didn't have her partake in the media day stuff. Like she wasn't there in the open workouts. And so you've got this athlete there in Saudi Arabia or wherever it was, so confused over the rules over the fight, the weight of the fight. Why am I not being part of media day, stuff like that? You're messing with her mentally. And then Clarissa Shields wins in a
Hmm.
decision. So like, but I think that might be a bit of a storyline. But there is, I mean, look, man, there's enough there that makes you think that there's some sort of conspiracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in reality, I think that's the only person that I can think that came from like another sport that's really done well, and done well is in quotations, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. It's
But no,
all, it's like a on
I don't
scale.
think, yeah, I don't think boxing is a reality for people, and I don't like an MMA star gaining credibility and becoming famous and popular, and then going there just to lose,
Hmm.
like
Yeah. Just for the big payday. Yeah.
just for the payday, because that's great for you, you get the payday, but it doesn't help your brand. It doesn't help the sport of MMA. It doesn't help your peers by you going over and losing.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Now, I mean, if you look up Ngannou, that's the first thing that's going to come up. It's also the most recent thing that happened to him is, of course,
Yeah,
him, getting folded in half by a superior boxer. I mean,
right.
you've mentioned Saudi Arabia and PFL, and we've done a podcast specifically on Saudi Arabia and boxing, the fact that they're
Oh,
revitalizing boxing.
yeah.
What do you think about their role in MMA? I mean, does it seem like a positive? Or is it kind of, yeah, I feel like you have mixed feelings about it.
I don't know, man. I don't know what the deal is with the whole money thing and the investment. Like I don't know how that all works, you know? I don't know that having the event in Saudi Arabia does that, what do you think that results in? You think that's making the
For
sport
the
bigger? Like,
sport,
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, well, I mean, we all know about Saudi Arabia's reputation over the years in the world, in the international community. It's reserved, kind of closed off. It's not somewhere you would think to go as a tourist. So they've done a lot of, critics will call it sports washing. Fans
Mhm.
will call it modernization. So it
Yeah.
depends on where you stand on things. So I think they're using boxing and PFL and other sports, soccer especially, to bring people to the country and push forward the modernization of it. So, and they have just money, they have a lot of money to burn. So I don't know if they're necessarily interested in growing the sport versus
Right.
just growing their own profile.
Yes, yeah, so I would agree with that. I think that what they're doing is they're doing it to make their overall country or brand or whatever it is, they're raising that. But I don't think it does anything for the sport. Like I don't know that the PFL versus Bellator championship series that they ran, um, having it in Saudi Arabia was any better than having it in Vegas
Hmm.
or having it in, where like some other hotbed of sports. You know what I mean? I don't know that
Yeah,
it does
yeah,
anything for the sport. And in reality, are the Saudi Arabian fans that like vested in that sport? Like I don't know that the crowd wouldn't be crazier in Vegas where people legitimately know who all these people are there because they are diehard fans. And then the other thing I think about is like if you're a UFC fighter or whatever, you're normally allowed to have like you get like a few tickets, right? If you're going to Saudi Arabia, I doubt, Joe from Alabama is bringing his, friends and
true.
cousins to Saudi Arabia. Whereas if it's in Vegas, hey, we can, somehow we can finagle the money.
Hmm.
So sometimes
Yeah,
taking it too far away or to these weird destinations, it might take it away for some of these people's fans and family members and stuff like that too.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean, I'll tell you from personal experience. I haven't been to Saudi in a long time. I think I went in 2011,
oh damn,
and they love WWE. That
oh
is
sure,
after soccer. WWE is king. I saw more kids with John Cena shirts than in the US. It was insane. Like for every
Yeah.
3 kids, one's wearing a soccer jersey and one is wearing a John Cena shirt. So at least
Yeah. Yeah.
back then. So I don't doubt their passion, I think, for combat sports, especially because it's kind of a novelty at this point. We're like,
Right.
wow, like this is something we never had access to before. But
Yeah.
I do think that, I mean, I know for boxing, I can say that it's good for the sport because they're using their money to make these big fights happen that maybe would not usually happen because boxing is a little more, people dodge each other and things like that. But I feel
Right.
like UFC, it's like you have to fight who you have to fight. You don't get to pick who you want to fight. It's just going to be, the league is going to determine who the big profile fight is going to be. So
Yep.
regardless, so I think the money aspect, maybe it's good for the fighters, but I don't think it's necessarily good for the fans, at least when it comes to combat sports. I mean, what do you
Yeah,
think?
and remember too, unlike boxing, right? Like a UFC fighter has a contract that is normally for X number of fights at X dollar amount. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it is confusing too when sometimes like you'll see fighters go, well, we need to negotiate. And then I'm like, negotiate what? Your contract already says how much you get paid. Like I don't even know what there is left to negotiate. So that's always a funny thing too. I mean, the time to negotiate is when you're up for a contract renewal, right? And that's what we've had UFC fighters on our show, and they say like, hey, what you do, you get into the UFC, which they say is not that hard to do, to get into the UFC the first time, but it's what you do once you're there. You got to win your fights. You got to you got to do so in a good fashion. And when that contract renewal comes, that's where then you negotiate your bigger set of money.
So as far as I know, the difference between UFC and maybe some of these other leagues, the MLB, NHL, whatever, is that they don't have a players union or a fighters union or whatever. They don't have a collective bargaining agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's been talks about one. There's been certain fighters that have been trying to push for a union and stuff like that. Francis Ngannou as well, when he was doing his negotiations with the UFC and later PFL, he had talked about some things like that, to have like fighter representatives and things like that, which essentially leads towards a union. The only thing that I would say that there is that's pretty cool that just started in, I think it was January of this year or maybe whatever it was. There's a MMA pension. Did you know that? And it's in California,
I
in
did
your home
not.
state. No, you didn't
Oh,
know?
that's great. Yeah. No,
Okay.
no, I didn't.
So and what's crazy is, so we had on our podcast, we had on Assembly member Matt Haney. He's from San Francisco. He's the assembly member that tabled the bill and wrote the bill, and it passed on its first reading. Uh, Republicans and Democrats, they all got together. They all supported this, which was incredible. So right now there's an MMA pension in California. It's for anybody around the world. All you have to do is compete in, I think it's 34 rounds, scheduled rounds in MMA in the state of California, sanctioned by the Nevada State or by the California Athletic Commission, California State Athletic Commission, CSAC,
Mm-hmm.
and you get a pension, which
Oh,
is
wow.
crazy, because like that shows California. So kudos to you and your happy brothers out there. But it shows the support that California has for the sport of MMA. And the idea is that it will encourage more organizations to run events in California. The pension is not run through taxpayers or anything like that. It's run through ticket sales. So the California State Athletic Commission takes, I believe it's $1 off of every ticket sold, and that feeds into a pension that they grow through, investments or whatever. And the idea
Wow.
is that once you complete those number of rounds, once you turn a certain age, you can then start collecting. And I think at the time that we had Assembly Member Matt Haney on, he said they were looking at it being, boy oh boy, now I forget, 15,000 a year or something like that,
Okay.
which is huge
Yeah.
for a sport that literally, like you said, in our lifetime was deemed cockfighting, human cockfighting, and you would never imagine that to
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Yeah, we've
So
gone
I,
from, yeah, I was gonna say, excuse me, saying we've gone from like New York not sanctioning UFC fights because of that to
right.
that's something like legitimizing it to this extent, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah, it's really crazy, and this is, and so I mean, like again, like I love that, man. Like once I heard that that was a go, like I worked hard to get him on as a guest, and I'm so happy to have him on. Like what a great guy, and he's just a fan of the sport. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he lives out in your area, maybe. No, no. He must be a San Francisco guy, but
Not
uh,
far.
yeah, not far. But great guy, man. And he did this because of his love of the sport and wanting to help athletes. Because he knows, like, hey, you invest a lot of your time as a professional mixed martial artist where you can't be growing like your career as an accountant. You know what I mean? So to
Hmm.
offset that, they've now generated this pension, and it's available for fighters around the world, which is so crazy. So
Yeah,
uh,
that's incredible,
that's a
and it
fantastic
looks like
thing, man.
it's. I was gonna say it's not funneled through the UFC or any other league, so they don't
Nope,
have to worry about that. It goes straight through the athletic commission. So
that's right. Yeah, and
yeah,
then
but
so the thing was,
mhm.
he said, at the beginning they were worried, like, okay, we're going to do this with the intent to encourage more events in their state. They of course were worried, like, wait a second, are promotions going to exit the state and go, well, wait a second, I'm not going to give you $1 for every ticket. But
ah,
he's
mhm.
but he said that on the flip side, he goes, what they've been seeing is that more promotions are happy about it and actually going to run more events because now more fighters will travel to California to fight. Because they're like, wait a second, I can start banking my rounds for a pension? Get me to
Yeah,
California. You know what I mean? Like, start booking more events. My
yeah.
co-host of my show is Ringside Rain Cruz. She's a cage announcer, and she actually announced at SummerSlam before.
Oh,
Uh,
very cool.
but she works for an organization out there called Up Next Fighting in California, and like they run shows constantly, and like it's amazing because you think all these local kids and these local fighters or people that are coming from outside are slowly working towards a pension. Like, incredible, man, incredible.
Hmm.
I may have to get in the cage and fight somebody to get a pension. I don't know. I might do it.
Yeah, I mean that's a big deal for the smaller guys, the no-name fighters. I mean, again, if
Yeah.
you're Conor McGregor or Francis Ngannou, whatever, you're not worried about a pension. But if you're kind of the grinder, just doing this, trying to
Right.
make it, then that's a big deal when you hit a
Yeah.
certain age and you just can't fight anymore. Uh, so
Yep.
back to UFC and the kind of the landscape of UFC and the sport. So right now, to me, it feels like we're in a bit of a transition period with some of the big names and the stars. Who
Yeah.
do you think? Let's pick like two or three of the biggest stars from the men's and women's side. I know that might be hard, but just for
In
the sake of
UFC,
time, yeah, it's specifically in UFC.
son of a gun, man. What I will say is it really depends on just who you are, right?
Okay,
Like, it really depends because depending on what kind of personality you like, what kind of style you like, you know what I mean? You can kind of go all over the map. You want to go men first? Star power. You're saying
sure.
star power?
Saying star power, who's driving, pay-per-views, who's
Yeah.
driving TikToks, IGs, you're in the content space. Who gets you the most clicks, the most views?
Uh, Sean O'Malley's got to be one, right? A real flashy guy, very
Yeah, he's an
controversial, but
entertainer. Yeah.
slick entertainer, right? So I'd say Sean O'Malley for sure. He's young, he's got the look. I would say Dricus Du Plessis. He's a South African guy. He's the champion now. I think that guy is getting a lot of eyeballs, and he's the total package, man. He's a guy with the look, the style, the charisma. He's very professionally put together. This guy. I think Dricus Du Plessis. He's a guy to keep an eye on. And then you want to go the total opposite side of him is the guy that he took the title off of. I think Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland is Mr.
Yeah.
America, you know, a woman in every kitchen and a gun in every hand.
Yeah.
Like, this guy is America, America, and he definitely gets people talking, gets people interested. And I would say he's very introspective and intelligent when you do catch him on podcasts and shows. He's not like just some idiot. This guy
Yeah.
is deep. He does have some thought to him. I think he plays stuff up a little bit. Plus, he's just a little bit of an insane maniac. But he's got some good stuff behind what he says, man. So, like, before you like totally throw him away, just listen to what he says sometimes, because he does have some important stuff to say. And but he's an interesting guy too, man. So
Yeah,
there would
I've
be my
seen
three
him
men.
Yeah, I've seen him show some vulnerability, which was
Yep.
interesting recently at I think he was in his car recording, talking about mental health and
Yeah.
the impact it's had on his life. And it was because all I know about him is what you said, the Merca kind of attitude and the
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of stereotypical meathead. And then he all of a
Yeah.
sudden he's in his car talking about mental health and he's on the verge of tears. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not
Hmm.
quite what I expected. He's not the and I know all these guys are human. They're all people. They're
Yeah.
not just caricatures. There's more to the personality. I think any fight, sport, boxing, whatever. There's a bit of you got to ham it up a little bit to
Yeah.
to get to be the villain or the good guy, the heel or whatever the opposite of that is in wrestling. I forget the term, but yeah, it makes sense. There's people have depth, even
Yeah.
fighters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the women's side, who's driving the eyeballs and the clicks there?
Well, geez Louise, man. It's a tough time in female MMA in the UFC. I think like with the loss of Ronda Rousey, the loss of Nunes, the loss of Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which I mean, people may not even know who the hell I'm talking about. But we've lost a lot of our major stars, you know, women that you would say are the GOAT, or the GWOAT.
Yeah,
Uh, right now, I would say, and don't at me on this, but Juliana Pena, who's a bantamweight, she's got the look. She's got a charismatic attitude. She's friends with Ric Flair, and she definitely cuts promos like Ric Flair. Like at least she's something that gets some energy and gets someone talking, right? So I like Juliana Pena. I do like Zhang Wei Li, which is the Chinese champion. She's the strawweight champion. She's learning English, so that's one thing, which is helping her sell herself to the Western audience. I think that's very important. If you're a UFC fighter, I really think the importance of you being able to speak English is very, very important. There
hmm
was a thing before where the LPGA, this is like a long time ago, but the female PGA, the LPGA
yeah.
was like doing something where they said you cannot compete unless you can speak English. There was a
Oh,
they were
really?
they tried to do that and then they suffered like massive backlash, but they did it at a time that there were all these like Korean females like dominating their ranks, and the LPGA couldn't sell them because they couldn't promote, they couldn't do advertisements because they couldn't speak English, and the LPGA was like, what the, like, we're in trouble here, right? Like our stars can't relate to our fans.
hmm
So, and then that bumbled and whatever. But I think now naturally athletes themselves are doing it. Anyways, Zhang Wei Li, I think she's good because she has that cultural appeal, or that, that she's bringing in a whole other audience, but she's a killer. Like she's freaking awesome. So she's good. And then, oh boy, like to say someone else, another female that stands out, I'm probably forgetting someone that's like really cool,
Sure.
but I'll say a Canadian fighter, Jillian the Savage Robertson. She's got like the red hair.
It's a great name.
Yeah, yeah. She's cool, man. She's big into the weed. So like if you're watching her Instagram and stuff, she's always like smoking up and thing. She's got a good look. She's not like an OnlyFans girl. You know what I mean? Like she doesn't go that crazy, but she's appealing, she's attractive. She puts out good content. She's kind of got some charisma about her, and she's like got, I think it's the most finishes or the most submissions in female MMA, or at least in flyweight. She's now, I think she's moved down to strike. She's just a charismatic individual. She's got the flashy look. She's got the style. And she's got a little bit of a social media presence that I think is pretty
hmm
cool. Yeah. But look, the thing is, you watch any week, you watch a UFC, and you'll find a new star that you're going to fall in love with. Like
Oh, absolutely.
that's just the nature of the sport.
hmm
Um, there's a Instagram page that I follow that I'm good friends with. It's called at MMA_gains, GAINS. And what they do is they track how many new followers the fighters get during the course of fight week and after the fights. It's very interesting, dude, because like sometimes the winner of a fight gains less than the loser.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes like some fighters gain way more. And then you look and you're like, wait, is it because she's like sexy? Or is it because like what, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
like this last weekend, it was Rose Namajunas, former champion, versus Amanda Hebus. And Amanda Hebus, good looking girl. Amanda Hebas loses and I think gained 90,000 followers, and the girl
Wow.
she beat only gained 10,000.
That's a
So,
hell of a, yeah, that's a hell of a, hell of a jump.
now I don't know percentage wise over how many they had before, but the fact of the matter is they were two main event girls. So essentially, you think similar stature in general, but that girl gained 90,000 followers, in that one fight. So I think, people are waking up to these people, man. And
Yeah.
so like if maybe you hadn't seen Amanda Hebas before or whatever, I don't know who didn't, but they saw her, they're like, whoa, that girl's good looking. They see her fight, they're like, whoa, this girl's a good fighter. Boom, there's the follow, and then
Yeah. Easy
90,000
follow.
followers more. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess the question about kind of maybe not, it's not, I wouldn't describe it as an issue per se, but I feel like the parallel to me is like the NBA, where the best players are all foreign born. They're
Mm,
European or wherever. Is that a concern? Maybe concern isn't the right word, but is that something that the UFC is thinking about? That the best fighters are. I mean, you mentioned Strickland is American, obviously. The South African gentleman, the
yeah,
Sean O'Malley's Irish, and then all the the Russian dudes, the Kamayev,
yeah.
and all those guys. Those to me are like the household names that jump off the screen. I mean, is that something that they're maybe thinking about? Like maybe we need more North American guys, or at least more American dudes.
I think as long as the fighter is good and the fighter is exciting and the fighter is interesting, and like I said, I think if somehow they can say, hey, look, we want you to learn English, I don't know that they care. I think just naturally you're gonna get American champions. I mean, there's so many crazy American gyms, right? Throughout, well, especially in California where you are, but like in
Yeah,
Florida, wherever, all around America, there's like powerhouse gyms. You know, you're gonna grow and you're gonna create champions. That's just how it is. I think it's nice that the champions are from all around the world, and it brings in new markets. Like the fact that Dricus du Plessis won the belt, they're now saying, "Hey, we're gonna have our first ever South African show." Right? I think the more times you get these fighters from different countries and they become champion, it gives an opportunity to open up the market to those countries that little bit more. You see
hmm
when like Ilya Tupuria, the Spanish guy, when he does well, you see the videos of him going home, and it's like the airport is full of people cheering for this dude,
yeah. And
right?
he's at a Real Madrid game, and it's like the president is there, basically. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, you know what I mean. So like that's really cool, man. Like to see that kind of happen, and to see the sport grow in that way. So I think the UFC is and all MMA fans should just be happy that we've got these stars all around the world bringing more eyes to the stuff. You know what I mean? Um,
got it. So it's not an issue. It's something that they should and seems like they are embracing, which is great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I will say, like when I was really lucky this year. At my first show of the year, I had Dricus du Plessis on my show, and I
Wow,
was like,
very cool.
how did I get this guy on my show? You know what I mean? Like I was like, what the hell? He comes on, dude. That podcast for me did far better than almost any other podcast I've ever done, and the engagement from South African fans, crazy. Like I've never had the engagement that I had from him, from people truly in South Africa. Like, because you can see their handles and stuff like that. And you can see that they're all truly South African. Man, they were out there to support their boy in droves. Like, which is really cool, man. And that's what you want to see, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure it galvanizes the fans from
Yeah.
Mali in Ireland, these other places. It's like that's our guy. Like
Yeah.
you said,
Yeah.
South African,
Exactly.
we're going to support our guy. We're Spanish, we're going to support our guy. And
Yeah.
maybe there's not as much split loyalties between different fighters because one guy's getting propped up from that country, so it's
Yeah.
easier for people to rally around them. So
Yeah.
before I let you go, I want to hear about your podcast. It's again
Yeah.
called the Fight and Sight podcast. So why did you start it? It seems like you're doing great things, getting a lot of good fighters on your platform. So how and why did you start the Fight and Sight podcast?
Oh, so started 4 years ago. We're on episode 164, I think, comes out as we're recording this today. It was just during the pandemic, man. Pandemic hit. I couldn't train anymore. I was at my mixed martial arts gym, for like 10 years or whatever. And then pandemic hits and you can't do anything. And so my friend, one of my friends was doing a podcast for comics. He owns a comic book store. And so he had me on a few times. They were doing a podcast just talking about nonsense. And I was like, oh, I really like this, but like I'd like to be in control of it myself. So I reached out to my one buddy who was like kind of into entertainment type stuff. And I was like, hey, do you want to do this? We put it together, took a while to get the logo, you know what I mean? Like get the logo out and do all that stuff. And then we launched it and we thought, okay, we'll just have some of our friends on and we'll just talk crap, you know? And the goal was never to talk like punch statistics and stuff like that. So like if your listeners are listening and are like, yeah, I want a new podcast to listen to, but I don't know a lot about MMA, don't worry, man. We don't It's not crazy. We talk more about like fun stuff, you know? Then all of a sudden we started having some UFC fighters say that they would actually come on our podcast. And we're like, oh,
Hmm.
really? Like, you'll come on our stupid little podcast from Toronto, Canada, you know? We didn't know
Yeah.
these people, right? We just reached out. Then they start coming on. And then we're like, oh, that'd be kind of cool if we had a guest like once a month or every couple, you know what I mean? Like every 2-3 weeks, if we could get a guest, that'd be cool. Next thing you know, we have a guest friggin' every week. Then we start having 2 guests a week, and then it got to the point where as you start to meet people and stuff, you start to make some connections. Some agents now will call me up and they'll say, hey, I got a fighter that wants to get some experience on the mic or wants to, promote a fight. Can they come on your show? When someone does that, man, I am like blown away,
You made it.
uh, yeah, like it's just so cool,
Yeah.
like, because I'll tell you, in podcasting, in anything in life, there's ups and downs, right? Like every week I say I'm going to quit this podcast. Every week I'm like, no, I'm done with this. Like, I don't like it takes so much time and effort. Like, kudos to you, man. You're doing your thing. It's a lot of work and effort, man. People have no clue the effort that it
Yeah,
takes to run a
for sure.
podcast, and we do it for fun. We're doing it like I'm not making millions of dollars. I'm not even making $1. You know what I mean? We're doing it for fun. We're doing it because it's a passion. It's something that we love to do and we just enjoy doing it. But it's a freaking boatload of work. And then so there's all the times I want to quit, and then something happens. I get the interview with Dricus Duplessis, or I get the interview with the guy on social media, Commander Dale, that does all those self-defense videos.
Yeah,
Like
I
the guy,
saw that the
Commander
Detroit like
Dale.
self-defense academy
Yeah,
where he's yeah,
yeah.
I saw
Detroit.
that.
He's come on my podcast a few times. Like that guy's a cool dude. But UFC fighters, ONE FC fighters, Muay Thai fighters, whatever, meeting all different people, man, from around the world. And it's just been such a pleasure to kind of get to know these people, share their story. We don't try to ask them the same stupid questions like, oh, what's your next fight? And how do you think you're going to win? Like, we just ask them like, hey, what's your life about? Like, what's going on? Tell us some funny stories. Like, we try to just get to the interesting stuff that you don't hear
Yeah, the
everywhere else,
personality stuff, yeah.
personality and things like that, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, and then that's it, man. So we've been going, like, I have not missed a single week. I've gone through 3 co-hosts.
Wow.
So I've always had a co-host. My first co-host, he eventually couldn't do it anymore, so he stopped. Then I had another co-host, and then they couldn't do it anymore. And now I'm on to, as I said, Ringside Ring Crew, who I really like. She's awesome because she's a cage announcer as well. So like she brings like a total different energy to it. And then just getting to know the people. And she's like new to MMA as well. So like she doesn't know everybody. Like, so I think she didn't know. She showed me a photo one time and she's like, hey, do you know who this guy is? I took a photo with him a while ago. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's Forrest Griffin. You don't know who Forrest Griffin is, right? So
It's like not knowing who like Joe Montana is or something.
yeah, exactly, right. But so it's fun, when we just have a good time and we have great
Mhm.
guests on. Probably the best moment of my show was when I had Bobby Green on, King Bobby Green. He's my favorite
It's
fighter of
awesome.
all time, like legend fighter. He's my absolute favorite. I tried to get him on, couldn't get him on, and then through whatever, one day I wake up. I'm headed to London, England on a vacation with my wife, and I wake up like the morning before our trip, and I get tagged on a story, and I open up my Instagram, and there's Bobby Green on his Instagram going, Fight Insight podcast. I heard you're looking for me. I'm going to come on your show. Let's do this. And I'm like,
Amazing.
what the hell? Right? Like, so that's the greatest moment in my life. If my wife is watching, it's second to my wedding day, but just between you and me, man,
Sure.
like greatest day of my life, man, that he would do that. And then he did come on the podcast and we had frickin' like such an incredible conversation. Like he was just so cool. He's so like relaxed and whatever. He's like sitting on a couch. He's like almost naked. Like he's just wearing shorts, but like he's got his legs up, like he's really like he's just such a
Just
funny
chilling.
dude, such a character, and he was just such a great guy. That was like when I did that podcast, I was like, that's it, I'm canceling the podcast. Nothing will ever be better than that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But then you get the next cool guest, and you next get the next great story, you know. And so I'm so blessed, and you know, just I have such a great time meeting these people and sharing their stories. And then I'll just say this: through the show and all that, I ended up meeting the owner of Fight League Atlantic, which is an organization out in Eastern Canada,
Okay.
and he runs a promotion out there. And last year, I was able to commentate their BJJ pay per view. So
Wow.
I did that, and that was like an absolute dream come true. And then a couple months ago, they brought me back out to commentate their MMA pay per view for FLA 13. Dream come true.
Incredible. Yeah,
And
that's really cool.
and then this April 12th and 13th, I'm going back out to Nova Scotia, and I'm commentating both the BJJ pay per view on the Friday night and the MMA pay per view on the Saturday. So, you know, I can't be thankful enough for the opportunities that this has brought to me, the changes in my life that it's brought to me, getting to meet you, man. Like if I didn't do this podcast, I'd never meet you. I'd never be on this show,
Yeah.
and just meeting the whole podcast community. You know, like it's been really cool. Like I've been on other shows and things like that. So it's just really nice to meet people doing their thing and having a love for whatever it is they do. But yeah, I mean, and then if you know, I will plug Fight League Atlantic. So check out fightleagueatlantic.com. And April 12th and 13th, man, the show, if you can't fly out to Nova Scotia, just watch. It's like $30 the pay-per-view. And like, you
Very
know,
cool.
like we said, you're supporting young guys, you're supporting young talent, you're supporting young fighters, and it's amazing. And they put on a freaking good show, dude. Like this is not a bingo hall, you know, like they're in like actual arenas and putting on great shows with great lighting and everything. So yeah, that's been my
Awesome.
journey so far. I don't know how long I'm going to do this, man. I want to give
Hmm.
up all
It's
the
a
time.
grind. Yeah.
And the thing is, you go weekly. You go weekly, right?
Yeah. We try to do weekly. Yeah.
Yeah. See, the minute I feel like if I skip a week, I feel like that's it. It's like your diet. You know what I mean? Like if I say like I'm going to eat good, but the first time I eat that cookie, I'm eating cookies the rest of the week, the month, the year. You know, like so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just stick with it because otherwise I know I'll lose it. But it's just too fun, man.
Hmm.
It's too fun not to do. So, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and
if you're
that's really all it
listening,
is. I mean, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
if you're listening to this and you love the 4040 show, after you listen to the 4040, then come over and check out Fight Insight podcast, and we'll be your second favorite podcast behind this one.
I love it. And I'll make sure
Yeah,
to include all the links and everything in the episode description. I mean, I think it's obvious what's so great about you is the passion, uh the love of the sport, the all that stuff. I mean, people can recognize when you are doing it for the love or you're just doing it just, for whatever, the clout, the whatever it might be. But people recognize that, and I think that's what makes you so.
yeah,
That's why people are reaching out to you, because they probably see your stuff. They're like, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's passionate. He's a great host, and I think that's pretty evident to our listeners and viewers here. So
yeah. I
this
hope
was
so,
great.
man.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for persevering through some of our technical issues. And
No,
again, like you said, the best thing about this stuff is just meeting people. I never would have had a chance to talk to you and a lot of my
yeah,
other great guests if it wasn't for this platform. And I'm really grateful for that, even if nothing else. So again, yeah,
yeah,
thank
man.
you, man, for really appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I hope to see you again one day.
Yeah, absolutely.